My name is Nicole Coleman, and I am here to present my capstone for my degree in music management. This capstone covers both the administrative aspect of the music business and the audio production side. First thing I'm going to do is explain the overview of the project through demonstrating the following steps. The music industry ecosystem, and I will talk about how to make money off of relationships, recorded music, and songs. Next, I will show 3 case studies with different musicians in detail with personalized plans. Each artist is going to use their own recordings in a different way to build their career. The needs for their career are different. With this in mind, classical artists use their recording to sell the recordings and to buy concert tickets. Jazz musicians use the recording for recording revenue and recording calls for part-time work. DIY musicians use the recording for their main business, whether it is for local, regional, or national followings. Last, I will conclude my predictions about the music industry in the years to come. This chart above outlines the music industry revenue from 2015 to 2019. It came from the Billboard Recording Industry Association of America. It depicts billions of dollars made annually in each sector of the music industry, with music publishing, recorded music, and concert tickets marked at the biggest revenue sources. In addition, instruments and equipment are a top 3 competitor regarding its income. Music retail is entirely different than leveraging intellectual property, so it is essential to point out the purpose of recorded music and concert tickets, which leverages creative work, whereas symphonic orchestras are tiny compared to recorded music, and this is a major problem for classical musicians making profit from touring. This chart above shows the music industry sales from 1977 to 2017. I'm using it to show the rise and fall of music sales, or in other words, the fluctuation of music shifting from a tangible item to an intangible item. Every musician must choose a selling platform. Back in the 70s and the 80s, we had 8 tracks, vinyl, cassettes, and in the late 80s, CDs were introduced, and they took up most of the music industry's revenue. As can be seen, vinyl peaked at 1978, and cassettes peaked around 1992 and 2000, and CDs peaked in 2000. When we switched from music being a tangible item to an intangible item, there was a big fall. With the accessibility of desktops, LimeWire and piracy gave consumers the option to not have to pay for music. Author Mark Katz explains how the tangibility of recordings clearly affects how music is consumed. Less obvious is how the tangibility influences the way that music is made. The arrival of the cassette utterly changed the pop scene. The less complex, cheaper medium allowed smaller labels and even individuals to create and distribute recordings. It was precisely the physical characteristics of the cassette, tangibly different from the LP, that helped prepare the ground for this revolution. This graph shows the uprise of streaming services after the loss of the physical format consumers were used to. Author Nick Rutley explained that through services like Spotify, Pandora, and Apple Music, they haven't replaced the money pipeline that CD sales provided, although they have reversed the industry's tailspin. For the first time this millennium, record industry posted an increase in revenue for 2 consecutive years. In addition, streaming is now the most common music platform in the United States. So regarding pandemic concerns in this past year, after recently interviewing entertainment lawyer Emily Hay, she was able to disclose to me some concerns about the pandemic and what it has done to jobs in the music industry. And that means that, touring crews and lower established musicians have had little to no income during this past year. And given the past year, there has been a lot of uncertainty. And this goes back to my statement of interest and concern with these shifts that were unforeseeable. Although these shifts occurred, the music industry relationships are still there and they're still prevalent. And it's really important to understand how these relationships worked in order to leverage their own intellectual property, since this differs between each musician. So music industry relationships. This chart is a great representation of the interrelations between different departments in the music industry or the music industry ecosystem. So given the complexity of this chart, I will disclose exactly what I'm highlighting. The main focus is on recording studios, producers, artists, publishing, and management. The University of California led a study on the overall ecosystem of the music industry. Dr. A.J. Scott explains the graph above as follows. The recording company itself operates basically as essential A&R, recruitment organization, and as the publisher of finished recordings. Around the core lies a constellation of distinctive economic and culture-producing functions ranging from songwriting and the provision of musical instruments on the one side to manufacturing and promotion and distribution on the other side. At various intermediate stages come other essential components of the production process, such as legal services, music publishing, recording studios, producers, sound engineers, and various accessory services. So the most important idea to highlight is the fact that the music industry relationships will differ between each artist and musician because at the end of the day, there are different things to leverage given different genres of music. So another addition is copyright, which is essential in the music business, and it deals with intellectual property, publishing and recording. And Dr. Michael Harrington from Berklee College of Music explains music copyright simply. You have a copyright from the moment that you create something, and it only needs two things. It needs to be original, and it also needs to have some tiny bit of creativity behind it. So, with that being said, a musician is protected federally if they have proof of their work. So this is indicated by sheet music, audio, or video. And these rights allow artists the authority to make money off of their music without anyone stealing it. So an example of publicly displaying could be a shirt that has your lyrics on it from a song that you wrote. And at the end of the day, performers benefiting from related rights can authorize or stop others from recording or fixing or broadcasting their live performance or otherwise distribute it. So this goes into music management. So music managers focus on one thing, and their main focus is focusing on relationships with their artists. That is their biggest priority at the end of the day. So how do managers make money? A manager's profit comes from touring and recording and publishing. And deal memos allow managers to put out a document with commission and contract requests as well. And also swag, such as selling t-shirts, albums, vinyls, posters, any of that stuff, they will make a portion from that if they are selling it. So their duties. So their main job is to take every advantage they can to exploit their client's talent. So protecting the relationship and getting the music to the right people is exactly how I explain the best music manager relationship. Author Jeff Barback explains that effective managers should have a relatively small number of artists they are handling, as each artist needs a good deal of time and attention. And each of these concepts are key to operating a successful manager and artist relationship. It's very tough work at the end of the day because you're operating a business by yourself, with somebody that might become as close to you as your family. And good managers have to create boundaries, and that might entail establishing a certain allowance with your artist, since the manager is in charge of their funds. So listed above is a mock contract agreement between the artist and the manager. These bullets are fairly self-explanatory, but furthermore explaining the manager shall be in charge of the artist's business affairs and best interests with third parties at the end of the day. So as stated in the previous slide, management contracts specify the income areas on which a commission will be charged. Although negotiable, many contracts specify a percentage of all income generated by the artist. So gross income includes the total of all income coming in, whether or not such items such as attorney fees and recording costs and so on will reduce the overall figure. And then this goes into record labels, and record labels sell recordings, and that is their main operation at the end of the day. So record labels make money from a band or an artist that they have signed to them. Whenever the artist sells an item, tangible or intangible, the record label profits from them. And whether it's merchandise, selling a record, collection of royalties, or touring, at the end of the day, they are making a profit. And this goes into music producers. And music producers focus on making and delivering the finished music product. That is their main duty at the end of the day. So how do music producers make money? Well, production deals can include a weekly salary and/or sporadic commission-based work. And royalties allow producers to collect a percentage of money based on how many albums they sell and so forth. And producers collect royalties semi-annually, so twice a year. And labels are also in charge of paying forth a production fee. So this tends to be a few $1,000s up front, but differs contract to contract. Music producer duties. Again, music producers deliver records to a record label. That is their main job. But they also have other duties such as, creative control, recording, mixing, and mastering. That's what they're doing on their own time. And there are different types of music producers. And with that being said, the music label producer is a full-time employee with salary. And the downfall to this type of production is the fact that you have little to no say on what type of artist you work with. And then the independent producer with a label contract does contract work, meaning labels choose to take this option in order to get the right fit for an artist if they must outsource. And then the independent producer, or the DIY artist, I should say, is more prevalent than ever. And some might call this DIY artists because they are in charge of sourcing the artist and delivering the production all on their own. And whether or not the songwriting and recording is the producer or not, the work is done completely by themselves. This goes into music publishing, and music publishers involve promoting their artists' finished product. That is their main duty at the end of the day. So how do music publishers make money? Author Jeff Barback discloses a refined but useful definition of the flow of financial income for music publishers. The financial value of a songwriter's and music publisher's catalog is based on the quality of the songs, the frequency and the nature of their use, and how they are licensed. So all of these points listed above are sources of royalty income. Again, we see that the play with tangible items such as mechanical royalties like CDs and records, and then our intangible items such as performance royalties like broadcasting or live performance. And then we have our duties of a music publisher, and it's really important to highlight that the industry has shifted due to technological advances. And author David Bakersfield simply defines the heart of the music publishing industry lies not in the print business, but in the marketing and administration of rights to songwriters' compositions. So these are the few but hefty tasks that a music publisher has to take on. And each of these duties are divided into a number of separate but interrelated departments. And publishers have the authority to reproduce and synchronize the compositions mechanically if they choose to do so. Relating to songwriters and music publishers' income sources, this chart above shows the relationships between the both of them. And I believe that a visualization of this process is extremely valuable. Author David Bakersfield explains, in order to generate a steady living wage, the writer must write and write and write, and then write some more, and must find ways to get the material published and recorded on a regular basis as possible. So again, this brings us back to the relationship between the songwriter and the publisher. It's extremely vital. And this leads me into talking about the performance rights organizations, and they issue licensing to the performance of music in which the songwriter collects royalties depending on how their song is used. So ASCAP is controlled only by composers and writers and music publishers, and that's what makes it very unique. Whereas BMI is owned by stockholders. And then last but not least, our third one is CSAC, and it's the only for-profit company. And it allows royalties to be paid quarterly. In addition, it also specializes in the licensing of public performances. So at the end of the day, it is personal preference depending on what type of artist you are. And that leads me into talking about concert venues. So how do concert venues make money? It's important to understand that this in fact is a multi-billion-dollar business. And it's also essential to highlight that merchandise sold at concert venues must be licensed, meaning merchandisers must pay out an artist a certain amount of money for distributing their t-shirts and posters and records that they sell at a concert. So when merch is sold at a concert, the venue will receive some sort of payout if their staff is helping out with the selling of their merchandise. And again, it definitely depends on the venue, but it's definitely upsetting to think about the revenue that's been lost in the past year and a half due to the shutdown of concert venues around the world. So in addition, they do make money through several different ways, and for starters, venue fees can be fixed price rentals, a percentage cut off box office, or a combination of those two elements. So a good example of price fluctuation is based on season and any day of the week. So, weekends will be usually priced at a premium because that's when it's the most popular time to go see a concert. And Live Nation and Ticketmaster are the major ticket platforms out there right now, and they sell over $300 million tickets a year. And tickets can range anywhere from $15 to $5,000, depending on who you're seeing, if it's VIP, what kind of package you have, and so forth. So in addition, we also have secondary ticket markets, which are really popular due to the internet. And people can resell tickets at whatever price that they please, and people will actually buy them. So, back then people were known as ticket scalpers for doing this, but from my experience, it seems that people understand that tickets are doing that, and it's somehow become more normalized these days. So in addition with concert venues, there are 7 types of concert venues, and above I have listed these 7 venues from size large to small, and their sizes can range anywhere from 100 people to 30,000 people. It definitely just depends. That leads me into my discussion about recording studios. And recording studios are the brains and power behind the music making process. So the recording process is very unique because recording music can be done on an artist's own or in a studio. And this list above are the general main technical investments that one must have in order to record on their own. So the initial recording investment is quite pricey, and especially the more technical one decides to get. And this process also entails treatment and facilities, which is extremely pricey at the end of the day. And the recording studio financial breakdown is quite pricey, and over the past decade, we see the resurgence of this DIY home studio artist, which has continuously been a trend, and with more and more free streaming services out there, such as SoundCloud, people are recording at home. And especially the past year with the ongoing pandemic, I believe it's essential to put all these things into perspective with this process, because it's a huge investment up front. $3,700 would be the bare minimum investment to get started with recording from home. And again, this will depend on the type of artist and what type of genre the artist produces. So how do music studios operate? Music studios operate with a full house staff. Traffic managers are in charge of booking studio time, and producing for labels are beneficial because you will have a full house staff willing and able to help you produce your best quality of work and doing the side work hustle stuff for you. So this illustration above depicts your classic common production chain for recorded music. And author Roy Izaki states that the quality of the recorded material has an enormous influence on the mixing stage. Just like any other job, one must devise a plan ahead of time. Studio time is extremely critical due to the expenses. So for my following case studies I'm about to present, I followed this mixing process. So for my classical artist Janessa, I did not go through a songwriting process nor arranging process. Classical music focuses on recording, mixing, editing, and mastering only. For my jazz artist Parker Swenson, I did not go through the songwriting process. Jazz music focuses on arranging, recording, mixing, editing, and mastering. And for my last case study, Jack Stewart, he represents my DIY artist, and he went through this entire recording process on his own. So case study one. Case study one involves Janessa, a current senior at Westminster College. Janessa is a piano performance major, and I had the opportunity to record and mix for her, as well as develop a personalized business and management projection plan. My job entails playing both parts, recording and business, in the context of this presentation. Janessa gets paid to play this piece locally and nationally, and her competitive advantage is her interpretation of this piece. And I wanted to capture one perfect sound, and this includes an exceptional grand piano, a tuned piano, a good sounding hall, a comfortable environment for her to play in, because at the end of the day, my main job is producing this piece, and I had to deal with volume leveling. So the recording process for her. So we decided to do a bunch of different mic techniques with her, and regarding the grand piano, the XY technique, as you can see above, is my favorite because I can hear bright, beautiful tones coming directly from the piano, and I did not receive any hall sound. And that's because of the close-up miking placement, as you can see. And it sounds really crisp, and I can also hear stereo width within its recording. In addition, it's a great balance between the treble and bass clef as well. Regarding the mid-side configuration setup, during this session, I actually forgot to turn on the figure 8 pattern on the bottom mic, so we did not get to analyze the sound properly. And then we decided to do the ORTF setup, and this is more of a distanced mic placement, which actually draws out the intimacy of the stereo width. And we chose to mic the piano and stereo so we could hear both the treble and bass clef. But it decided to do its own thing, and it definitely gave us more of a bigger, broader sound. So I think that this mic setup is best for an audience perspective, not recording. And regarding the bloom line, with this technique, we noticed a stronger signal in the right ear throughout the entire performance, and the ribbon microphone was actually blown, so we did not get an accurate representation of this sound. And then our spaced Omni, so this sound was definitely coming from the omnidirectional setup, which is almost identical to the XY, and it's fascinating that I didn't receive a similar sound, even though its placement wasn't intimate by any means. And I heard some hall sound in this recording, but I think it could have gotten a more direct sound with better placement. So overall, I didn't receive a high-low stereo image. And then our mono miking. So both microphones were not capable of delivering 2 separate audio channels, which means that there was 0 stereo width. So considering that we placed both mono mics from 8 feet away, I do not think that they captured the piano's best sound, in my opinion. And then the condenser mic actually sounded more full and overall because it picked up a lot of hall sound, but it also picked up some good direct sound. And this was a great way to experiment and see how important it is to have 2 stereo mics closer to the piano for the best and direct sound for Janessa. So regarding her editing and mixing process, this process was extremely tedious. My main job is looking for the best take, and I had to take a very aggressive approach to editing since I only worked with one sound source. So first I chose what microphone placement and takes I wanted to choose from. So after chatting with Janessa, we both agreed to choose the XY, and then we both agreed to take her take 1 and take 3 and combine them together since there were a lot of ups and downs. And because we recorded with one source with multiple mics, there can be phase issues in mixing. So before we start mixing, we check our phase, and then just to make sure that there is no phase cancellation. And reference tracks are also a great way to make sure that our mixes sound as good, or at least comparable to commercially successful releases. So the volume automation tool in Logic allowed me to go in and adjust any part of the track that I wanted to raise and lower. Regarding her mastering, after all of the volume automation was complete, I added fades for the intro and the end so that there was a smooth transition throughout. And after this process, I applied EQ and then compression to the final track. EQ allows one to alter or boost certain frequencies of a given audio signal, and author Vijay Manzo describes equalization as tone shaping. So by adding subtractive EQ to this track, I was able to cut out unwanted frequencies. And by cutting these frequencies out, I was able to produce a more clear piano sound for Janessa. And then after this, I decided to apply compression, which levels out the loud and the soft levels of Janessa's performance. So the range of dynamics, loud and soft levels in classical music recordings tend to be much larger than in popular music. And dance music typically has a lower dynamic range, whereas a performance of an opera has parts that are very quiet and parts that are very loud. So I'm going to go ahead and play the sample that I got for Janessa. So with any musician, every musician out there, no matter what genre you are, they have to face some sort of opportunity cost. And given the small number of orchestras, job opportunities are very slim. And Dr. Kosum from the University of Iowa explains statistics on the outcome of orchestras. And orchestras worldwide are supported by subsidies, private funding, earned income, and other sources. However, such funding is provided directly in different countries. So America is actually the only country where orchestras rely on private donations as their principal source of income, which is about 50%. And then the second source of their income is through earned income, which is the second highest on the list. So earned income for Janessa in this scenario would be ticket sales, subscriptions, touring, and other performances. And author David Bakersfield also states to qualify for the concert and symphonic field, students today will complete at least a master's degree, often a doctorate. And so at the end of the day, you kind of have to ask yourself, okay, is it worth it? Do I really want this? Because it's a lot of initial investment up front. So this is the path that any artist can follow. There are 3 stages. So you will start locally, then regionally, and then nationally. And many people want to establish themselves as an artist, but then they don't make it. But Janessa can make it if she has a personalized business plan. So stage 1 involves playing local concerts, competition, and her own recitals. Stage 2 involves regional touring, networking, and teaching. Her touring will include universities and classical festivals, and she should be looking to play a concerto with a local or regional orchestra. And then stage 3 will be Janessa's big break, and this means that Janessa will have a contract to play at a major festival and receive some sort of record deal out of it. So regarding representation for Janessa, the best route for her in her career is finding an agent to represent her. And agents are given the full power to book shows for their clients. So Janessa's agent, with permission, would take 10% of her income from concert touring and product endorsement. So Janessa wouldn't have to deal with all this stuff on her own. So this is a typical mock schedule that I personally made up for Janessa. Again, this schedule will vary artist to artist, but it's most important to emphasize the fact that classical musicians must be flexible, meaning Janessa must be ready for the gig when it happens. And many professional musicians manage a different kind of moonlighting, which means that, they accept every attractive playing job that comes along, then they fill in with a balance of their work week with music-related employment such as concert, composition, arranging, record production, whatever it might be. So while Janessa is coming out of school, she should invest her time and money into receiving a master's degree. And after she completes this path in 2 years, she will then teach privately or with a university. But then this will bring in daily income, and then as she strives to nail a job in an orchestra or a concert artist. So as a concert pianist, her average income would be about 50 grand if she decides to make her life like this. So as can be seen, agents must follow certain guidelines with national agencies, and Janessa's agent would comply with this agreement. And this contract will ensure rights and financial compensations, damages, and a membership with AFM. So my case study 2 is with percussionist Parker Swenson. I had the pleasure to record and mix 2 different demos for Parker, one jazz demo and one stylistic demo. So in addition, I have created personalized business and management projection plans for Parker. And this recording is specific for jazz, and they highlight Parker's percussion skills, his own voice on the drums, his ability to cross styles, improvisation, and professionalism. So at the end of the day, as a producer, my main job was to capture Parker's best sound, not to manipulate it by any means. So in addition, my interest was making sure that he was comfortable with showing me his best product in the studio while working with him. And Parker needs his recording to use for demo purposes in order to generate more work in the future. So this was the recording process for Parker. We recorded a basic drum kit. We had 6 mic stands and 6 balanced XLR cables. So we decided to mic the overheads, we mic'd the kick drum, and we mic'd the snare drum, the floor tom, and the rack tom. So Parker's mixing stage was definitely more complex than Janessa's, but it started with a simple plan, just like classical recording, because I decided to devise a mixing plan before I went head deep in it. So by isolating the tracks, I had the advantage of making sure that the microphones were placed accordingly with no clipping and distortion to be heard. After this, I was able to level out the volume of each track, and then I grouped them together. In the end, I decided to add New York style compression, and I was able to achieve a punchier and a thicker sound for Parker. And then Parker's mastering is pretty similar to classical recording because I decided to use subtractive EQ to level out Parker's high and lows throughout his performance. And again, I had to be very careful with this approach due to the type of demo tracks that Parker wanted to produce. And the drums had a smaller dynamic range than the piano did, and I did not want to approach, being aggressive with the volume leveling, because at the end of the day, I needed to capture Parker's most natural sound. So I'm going to go ahead and play Parker's sample. So regarding the opportunity cost for Parker, this is what I would think about as his manager, highlighting the fact that Parker should watch his expenses. So the big question me must ask is, does jazz still matter? Author Ingrid Monson explains how jazz today has lost its size of audience as compared with forms of popular music with bigger market shares. Author Tim Bakersfield explains how the old days of the sharply delineated classical and jazz musician are nearly gone. So almost all pros now must cross this line, and there's a lot of truth to this statement. Parker does have more opportunity than Janessa being a drummer due to the versatility of being a percussionist. And with that being said, Parker could grab extra gigs playing with other genres of music, such as rock or pop. This will give him the extra advantage of more gigs. Although his main focus is jazz, he can decide whether or not he would tour with a band as a stand-in who needs a kick-ass drummer. So, representation for Parker. As an agent, this is what I'm thinking about for him. Similar to Janessa, once established, Parker will have a relationship with a musicians union, AFM, and a relationship with a record label who will produce and support his content. This will give him the advantage of being represented by a liable agent who can book him shows at bars, clubs, touring, whatever it may be. And then this is Parker's three-stage plan. So stage 1 for him, this degree is way more important for Parker because jazz is a very tough institution, and Parker must gain experience with playing with lots of different types of people. And the best thing Parker can do in this stage is play with touring bands and theater productions. Stage 2 is very essential because Parker must tour, and employment flexibility and networking to create relationships around the country with other musicians. To establish himself, he must play with more established musicians. And then stage 3, Parker will tour where he is the main artist. In addition, he will sign with the music label to release content and tour, and this is where Parker has made his big break. So touring. So touring support covers Parker's expenses on tour. So the label that Parker is signed to will help pay for his touring expenses. With that being said, there is no doubt in my mind that profits from live shows are what keep the ecosystem working. Everyone knows that touring expenses continue to rise with gas costs, hotel rates, food costs, and so forth. Musician Jack Conte supplied data from his 28-day touring experience with a well-known band called Pamplemousse. Given his experience, he stated that 72% of the band's income actually came from ticket sales. So this is another mock schedule that I made up for Parker's daily schedule, which is quite similar to Janessa's. At least half of Parker's income is derived from his daytime job, which could be teaching with local universities, private lessons on his own time, or picking up any other daytime job that might not be music related. But the other half of his living will come from the music related gigs that he is able to grab. So this leads me into my last and final case study 3, with musician and student Jack Stewart. Jack is representing himself as a DIY artist, and with that being said, I did not have to record and mix demos for Jack. But this allowed me to focus on developing a personalized business management production plan for Jack. So before I play his songs, I want to highlight how recordings function in specific contexts to generate revenue for pop artists like Jack. Jack makes money off of his songs from selling recordings, playing shows, and publishing. In his recordings, it's essential for him to have qualities such as a hook that'll caption the listener, broad appeal, content that reflects the artist's brand, and then underlying that the bar is high and that most professional music is made with a full house staff, because each of these things are highly competitive. So listed above are notes from Jack's recording process, and Jack stated that he struggled with numerous aspects of the recording process because he wasn't working in a professional studio. This caused issues with room noise, mixing issues, and quality. And this is a big struggle because he's not working out of a multi-million-dollar recording studio, but it's still possible. So his mixing and mastering process was unique. All layers were compressed and EQ'd to try to tame out the room sound that he struggled with. And the vocals had EQ, compression, delay, and reverb applied to them. In addition, the piano backing track was made using a keyboard. And Jack decided to use delay and reverb to compensate for not being able to record the sounds he wanted to acoustically. And these elements created more width and depth in Jack's tracks. And then he actually was able to play drums from an OP1 sampler, which is up here. And I'm going to go ahead and play Jack's 2 demos for you.
Early to the party, you're the first one there. Overdressed and underprepared. Standing in the kitchen, stressing out the halls. Pulling teeth till anyone arrives. Excuse yourself and smoke a cigarette outside.
And then the next demo.
Cocaine in your pocket gets you through the night. Then I won't be the one to stop you from having a real good time. It's close friends in the kitchen and good ones on the floor.
So again, it's really important to highlight that Jack made these all on his own and not in a professional recording studio. So Jack's opportunity cost is a pretty steep initial investment compared to Janessa and Parker. Initially, it's only a $4,000 investment if you consider taking his undergraduate degree away. But the investment starts to get steep once he starts to establish himself regionally and nationally. And once established, his primary source of revenue will come from royalties, commercial work, recordings, streaming, and touring. So listed above are the 3 stages that Jack's career will go through if he is successful. So stage 1 is all about getting Jack's music out there, which means Jack will be playing at every coffee shop and every bar, utilizing all local resources. So he might book his own shows, or he might have the advantage of having local representation. These will all be short-term deals unless someone can take his music to the next level. Regarding stage 2, booking shows around the country, networking, and finding proper representation. This is the hardest stage due to the cost of touring and recording and networking. It all costs money, and this process does not happen overnight. So Jack will have to put in the work on his own time in a very big way. And this is also a time where he could be taking on other jobs in music, like teaching private lessons and so forth. So hoping to have some sort of independent contract deal with a record label at the end of stage 2 is ideal for Jack. And then stage 3 is where Jack makes it. He's had his big break. He will have signed some deal with a label, and then he will reassess all strategic partnerships with previous deals, contracts, and managers. So regarding contracts and licensing, there are 2 options for Jack if stage 3 is not a success. Jack can leverage his skills through additional revenue streams. So if Jack takes a deal with a label as an independent producer under contract, he then has the ability to work as an independent contractor and will have an assigned budget from a label. Regarding licensing, Jack can get his music out in the open through sync licensing. This will allow Jack to get exposure in his work placed in TV, film, commercials, anything that will help Jack's business grow with no cost. So in a day in the life for Jack is a lot different than Janessa and Parker, because at the end of the day, Jack has way more freedom with his music direction. But Jack must live the part, meaning he must focus on networking and social media, making it look like he's doing it and he's doing the thing and he's meeting people and he's getting all of his content out there 24/7. So with that in mind, I have decided to come to my conclusion. And in conclusion, according to the global record industry, statistics conclude that the music industry grew by $1.5 billion in 2020. So with that being said, being able to record and mix at home is very empowering because technology will continue to advance and become cheaper. People can then educate themselves online by clicking a YouTube video titled How to Make Music. But in addition, technology is also having an effect on the accessibility of self-publishing and marketing. Veteran music manager Joe Greenwald recently told me how the world has never been flatter in terms of getting an artist's content out there. And on the other hand, there are 3 threats to highlight with the music industry. We have AI, streaming, and consolidation. AI mixes and audio generates songs, which may change job availability for certain artists in the industry. In addition, it decides to curate playlists. So musicians who want to survive in the music industry may need to adapt their business practices to conclude some sort of relationship with AI, whether this means coding, logic, or programming. Streaming isn't able to grow and shrink based off of hits that are produced nowadays. So 2 artists can come out with a hit album on the same day, but the pie won't get any bigger because there will be the same number of subscribers after those hit albums come out. So back at the turn of the century, when the industry, was mainly publishing sheet music, this president was sent. This new model is an inflection point causing lots of uncertainty. So my prediction is that the role of recording will change and be a business card for tours rather than a finished, sellable product. So this will affect quality, jobs, and the music industry as a whole. But this will enable an opportunity for one to come back and restore a level of quality. So despite these threats, the music industry will continue to thrive through publishing, ticket sales, and recording. And that is the end of my presentation. And I just wanted to give thanks to Westminster College and everybody helping me through the process.